Hey everyone, Howard Pinsky here from iceflowstudios.com with a cross-application tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how Adobe Photoshop Lightroom 4.1 and Adobe Photoshop CS6 can work hand in hand to produce stunning HDR images. In the past, I would typically use one or the other, Lightroom with a plugin, or directly merge the photos to Photoshop's HDR Pro. So if I could only use one application in the past, why the heck would I want to use two? Well, there's a very good reason: 32-bit editing. With Lightroom 4.1, we now have the ability to edit 32-bit HDR images, which eliminates the need for an external plugin, and you're more likely to end up with a much more natural result. Let's go ahead and take a look. So here in Lightroom, I have three images which I took at Oxford University. As you can see, each image has been taken at a different exposure to capture the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, which a single image simply cannot do. I'm only working with three images, but if you want an even higher dynamic range, you can easily use 5 brackets if your camera supports it. So with all three images selected, I'm going to right-click on any of them, go to Edit In, and then select Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop, which has been there for a while. At this point, Photoshop will spring into action and start the process of not only combining the three exposures, but it will also attempt to line up the images. Sometimes, especially if you're like me and don't use a tripod, don't tell anyone, your photos may be slightly misaligned. Lining them up will give you a much cleaner result. And here's the HDR Pro window, which many of you may be familiar with, but instead of going through all the sliders to create a 16-bit HDR image, we're actually going to switch it over to 32-bit here at the top. This will simply merge all three of the images and the data, allowing us to bring it back into Lightroom and use all the wonderful adjustments that Camera Raw has to offer, which again should give you a much more natural result than HDR toning would. Now don't worry too much about the white point slider at the top, it's simply there for preview purposes. I'll click OK to finalize the merge, which could take a few minutes depending on your computer and the amount of exposures that you're working with. And once the merge is complete, all you need to do is save. A simple Command or Control S will pop your new 32-bit image in the same location that the other images are stored. Let's hop back over to Lightroom where our new image should be waiting for us. And there it is. From here, you can use the same adjustments that you've been using previously, but because we have a 32-bit image made up of 3 exposures, there's a ton of data to work with. Take a look as I increase and decrease the exposure. Obviously, you wouldn't need to go this extreme, but it gives you an idea as to what's actually available to you. I'll leave the exposure increased ever so slightly. I'm going to dump the highlights to get rid of some of the unnecessary bright areas. And then I'm going to increase the shadows to allow us to see into some of the more shaded areas of the photo. And of course, what's an edit without increasing the clarity? This will increase the contrast of your midtones, which looks great on textures such as bricks and stone. Finally, the overall color of this image is a little bit dull, so increasing the vibrance a touch should do the trick. I'm not going to touch the saturation slider as the stones have a lot of yellow in them. Increasing the saturation on images that contain a lot of yellow or skin tones can result in some unnatural effects. Sliding down the Develop module, the Selective Adjustment tool is also available to us. I love this tool. You're able to selectively adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance of any part of your image. For example, if I wanted a slightly darker sky, under Luminance I can activate the Selective Adjustment tool, and then click and drag on the color that I want affected, in this case, the blue of the sky. Dragging up will brighten it, while dragging it down will darken it. The same goes for hue and saturation. Let's say I wanted to slightly decrease the yellow tint in the stones. Selecting saturation will allow me to use the same tool to increase or decrease the saturation of the stones, and even the grass if I wish. Finally, let's slide down to lens corrections to deal with some of that chromatic aberration that I see in the trees. Also new in Lightroom 4.1, I can use the fringe color selector to sample any blue or green fringes that may be present, and then adjust the sliders if necessary. And that should complete the edit. Let's take a look at the final result in comparison to the original images. We started with an overexposed image to capture the shaded areas of the scene, an underexposed image to capture the lighter areas like the roof of the building, and a neutral image to capture everything in between. And merging all three images into a 32-bit HDR file and performing some pretty basic edits, we're left with a beautiful photo that captures a range that's more true to what the human eye sees. So even though it may seem more convenient to use only one application, utilizing all of your resources can leave you with a much more desirable result. If you want to catch more tutorials just like this, check me out at iceflowstudios.com. Take care.